She took her only son to her friend's wedding, only to see her billionaire CEO ex, the son's father, marrying the same friend. "Mommy, is that man staring at us?" Kieran tugged at his mother's sleeve, his curious eyes fixed on the tall figure across the ballroom. Nora Sinclair felt the air vanish from her lungs as she turned. 9 years dissolved in an instant. There he stood, Thaddeus Lockhart, looking even more devastating in a tailored tuxedo than he had in her memories. The same chiseled jawline, the same piercing gray eyes that had once looked at her with such passion, now wide with shock. "Nora," his voice carried across the rehearsal dinner, causing heads to turn. Is he? Her hands trembled as she gripped her son's shoulders protectively. "We need to leave. Now." "But why?" Kieran's innocent question hung in the air. Who was that man? Before she could answer, her college friend Imogen appeared, radiant in her pre-wedding gown, linking her arm through Thaddeus's. "Nora, I see you've spotted my fiancé." Nora's world tilted on its axis as the horrible truth crystallized. The mysterious billionaire CEO her friend was marrying tomorrow was the same man who had walked away from her 9 years ago. The same man who had never known he had fathered a son who now stood beside her, with his father's unmistakable gray eyes. Have you ever kept a secret so long that revealing it could shatter multiple lives at once? What would you do if fate forced your hand in the most public, painful way possible? Today's story explores exactly that impossible situation, when a single mother comes face to face with her past at the worst possible moment. If you've ever wondered how one choice can change everything, stay with me for this heartbreaking tale of secrets, betrayal, and the lengths we go to protect those we love. The invitation had arrived on a Tuesday, its heavyweight cream envelope standing out amid the bills and junk mail cluttering Nora's kitchen counter. The return address bore a name she hadn't seen in years, Imogen Frost. The elegant calligraphy inside announced what Nora could scarcely believe. Her once closest friend from college was getting married at a luxurious Lake Tahoe resort, and she wanted Nora and her little one to attend. "Who's that from, Mom?" Kieran asked, peering up from his cereal bowl, milk dribbling down his chin. At 8 years old, he was the perfect blend of her copper hair and freckles, but with eyes that didn't come from her side of the family, steel gray eyes that sometimes made her heart catch when he looked at her certain ways. "An old friend," Nora replied, wiping his chin with a napkin. "Someone I knew before you were born. She's getting married and wants us to come to her wedding." "A wedding?" Kieran's face lit up. "With cake. Weddings usually have cake, yes." Nora smiled despite the unexpected emotions swirling through her. Imogen Frost. They'd been inseparable through 4 years of design school, dreaming of the empires they would build. Then life happened. Nora got pregnant. Imogen moved overseas for a prestigious internship, and their once unbreakable bond dissolved into occasional social media likes and holiday cards. "Can we go? Please?" Kieran was bouncing in his seat now, wedding cake clearly the only thing on his mind. Nora studied the invitation again. A weekend at a 5-star resort was well beyond her usual budget as a freelance interior designer, but the invitation mentioned that accommodations would be provided for out-of-town guests. And it had been so long since she'd taken a proper vacation with Kieran. "Let me think about it," she said, tucking the invitation into her planner. "Now finish your breakfast, or we'll be late." Later that evening, after Kieran had gone to bed, Nora poured herself a glass of wine and reopened the invitation. There was a handwritten note tucked inside that she hadn't noticed earlier. "Nora, I know it's been forever, but getting married has me feeling nostalgic for the people who knew me before I became whoever I am now. There's so much I want to catch up on. Please say you'll come. All expenses covered. Consider it an apology for being such a terrible friend these past years." The groom's insisting on handling everything. "You'll see why when you meet him." "Love him." Nora sipped her wine thoughtfully. The Imogen she'd known had been brilliant but perpetually broke, subsisting on ramen noodles and ambition. Whoever this fiancé was, he'd clearly changed her financial circumstances dramatically. Her phone buzzed with a text. "Speak of the devil. Did you get it? Please tell me you're coming. It won't be the same without you XOM." Nora hesitated, then typed back. "Got it today? Congratulations. Not sure if I can swing it with Kieran's schedule." The response came immediately. "Bring him. We've got activities planned for kids. I've never even met your little man. Please, Nora. I miss you." A lump formed in Nora's throat. Despite the years and distance, there had been a time when Imogen knew her better than anyone. Before Thaddeus, before Kieran, before the choices that had shaped her life into what it was now. Okay, we'll be there. 3 dancing emojis appeared in response, followed by, YSSSS. You won't regret it. Sending all the details tomorrow. Love you. Nora set down her phone and leaned back against the couch, wondering why she felt a flutter of unease beneath her excitement. Perhaps it was just the strangeness of reconnecting with her past when she'd worked so hard to focus on her future. Or perhaps it was the thought of introducing Kieran to a world she'd deliberately kept him separate from. Either way, she'd said yes. And Nora Sinclair always kept her word. The next morning, as she helped Kieran with his school project, a diorama of the solar system that was currently exploding glittered all over her dining table, Nora found herself studying her son's profile with fresh eyes. The determined set of his jaw as he carefully positioned Neptune, the slight furrow between his brows as he concentrated, the way he absent-mindedly pushed his glasses up his nose with one finger. All Thaddeus. Mom, you're staring, Kieran said without looking up from his work. It's distracting. Sorry, she said, smiling. Just thinking about how much you've grown. I grew a whole inch since my birthday, he informed her seriously. Dr. Powell measured me. That's impressive. Nora handed him the container of silver glitter for Saturn's rings. So, about that wedding I mentioned yesterday, how would you feel about going to Lake Tahoe for a long weekend next month? There's a beautiful lake and mountains and apparently activities for kids. Kieran looked up, interest piqued. Can I bring my telescope? Ms. Garcia says the stars look amazing from high elevations because there's less atmosphere in the way. Less atmosphere, huh? Nora grinned. I'm sure that can be arranged. And yes, of course you can bring your telescope. Cool. He went back to his project, adding thoughtfully, I've never been to a wedding before. They're fun, Nora assured him, though her own memories of weddings were limited. Her parents had eloped. Her brother had a courthouse ceremony. And she'd never made it that far with anyone. Not even with Thaddeus, though there had been a moment when she'd thought they might be heading in that direction. Before everything fell apart, Kieran's voice pulled her from the memory. Will the man getting married be my friend after? Like an uncle or something? The innocent question caught Nora off guard. I don't know, sweetie. I haven't met him yet. I haven't even seen Imogen in years. Oh, Kieran seemed to process this. But she's your friend? She was my very good friend, a long time ago. Before I was born. Yes. When you lived in New York? Nora nodded, wondering where this line of questioning was headed. Kieran had always been curious about her life before, though she'd kept many details vague, especially anything involving his father. Did she know my dad? And there it was. The question that inevitably emerged whenever the past came up. Nora took a deep breath, choosing her words carefully as she always did on this topic. She knew of him. They weren't friends. Kieran absorbed this, adding a splash of blue paint to earth with careful precision. Do you think I'll ever meet him? My dad. Nora's heart constricted, as it always did when Kieran asked about Thaddeus. I don't know, sweetheart. His work takes him all over the world. Not entirely a lie, last she'd heard. Thaddeus had expanded his tech company internationally. Like a spy? Kieran looked intrigued by this possibility. Nora laughed despite herself. Not exactly. More like a businessman. Very busy and important. Also not a lie. I bet I could find him, Kieran said with the casual confidence of an 8-year-old who'd recently discovered the internet. I could Google him. You'd need his name for that, Nora pointed out, then immediately regretted opening that door. So tell me. Kieran looked up at her, gray eyes serious behind his glasses. I'm old enough to know my own dad's name, Mom. Nora hesitated. She'd always planned to tell him eventually, when he was older, when the explanation of why his father wasn't in his life wouldn't sound so much like abandonment, when the whole messy truth wouldn't risk tainting his sense of self-worth. His name is Thaddeus, she said finally. Thaddeus Lockhart. Kieran tested the name silently, mouthing it to himself. That's a cool name. Like a superhero or something. I suppose it is. Nora brushed a copper curl from her son's forehead. Now, how about we finish this solar system before we're both late? As Kieran returned to his project, Nora wondered if she'd made the right choice. She'd always been careful to speak neutrally about Thaddeus, never vilifying him despite her own complicated feelings. He hadn't known about the pregnancy. That had been her choice, made in the raw aftermath of their breakup when his career was imploding and her news would have seemed like either a trap or a burden. By the time she'd realized she might have been wrong to keep Kieran a secret, Thaddeus had already rebuilt and transformed his failing startup into an international tech phenomenon. The awkward, by the way, "You have a 2-year-old son" conversation seemed impossible then, and only grew more daunting with each passing year. Now, watching Kieran complete his model of the solar system with the same methodical focus she'd once observed in his father, Nora wondered for the 1,000th time if her choice had been fair to either of them. The detail package from Imogen arrived 2 days later, and Nora's eyebrows rose higher with each page she turned. Private cabins for guests. Multiple pre-wedding events including a welcome reception, a boat cruise, and a rehearsal dinner. A separate schedule of supervised activities for children, ranging from nature hikes to craft workshops to movie nights. This was no ordinary wedding. This was the kind of extravagant celebration featured in lifestyle magazines. What exactly had Imogen been doing these past 9 years? And who was this mysterious fiancé bankrolling what must be a 6-figure wedding weekend? The final page of the package contained a personal note from Imogen. "I know what you're thinking. This is not the same girl who once wore a garbage bag as a raincoat because she couldn't afford an umbrella. Life has taken some wild turns. Can't wait to tell you everything in person. Just trust me when I say you're in for some surprises. All my love, him. P.S. I've never mentioned you to my fiancé. Thought it would be fun for you two to meet fresh. He's in tech too. You'll have loads to talk about." Nora set down the package with a frown. Something about the note struck her as odd, though she couldn't quite put her finger on why. Perhaps it was just the surreal quality of reconnecting with someone who had once known all her secrets, but who was now essentially a stranger. Shaking off her unease, Nora began making lists, clothes they would need, arrangements for their cat, out-of-office messages for her clients. Whatever this wedding turned out to be, it would at least give Kieran a chance to experience something new and exciting. And maybe, just maybe, it would give Nora a chance to reconnect with a friendship that had once meant everything to her. For weeks later, Nora's car wound up the mountain road toward the Lake Tahoe resort. Kieran pressed against the window in the back seat, exclaiming over every vista and wildlife sighting. "Mom, I think I just saw a bear," he shouted, fogging up the glass with his excitement. "Probably a large dog, honey," Nora replied, navigating a particularly sharp curve. "But keep your eyes peeled. The welcome package said there are lots of deer around the property." As they rounded the final bend, the resort came into view, and even Nora couldn't suppress a gasp. Nestled against the backdrop of snow-capped mountains and the glittering blue lake, the collection of luxury cabins and a grand central lodge looked like something from a fairy tale. Stone chimneys rose above timber roofs, and expansive windows reflected the breathtaking natural surroundings. Pristine gardens surrounded the buildings, and a wooden dock extended into the lake where several boats bobbed gently in the afternoon light. "Whoa," Kieran breathed. "Is this where we're staying?" "Apparently so," Nora said, equally awestruck. "Your mom's friend certainly knows how to pick a wedding venue." They pulled up to the welcome center, where an attendant in a crisp uniform immediately approached to take their bags and park their car. Nora felt distinctly underdressed in her travel clothes as they were escorted into the soaring lobby of the main lodge, all stone and timber and views of the lake beyond. "Miss Sinclair," a young woman with a tablet approached them. "We've been expecting you. I'm Brielle, the wedding coordinator. Miss Frost asked me to personally ensure you're settled in." "That's very kind," Nora said, acutely aware of her wrinkled blouse and Kieran's dinosaur t-shirt amid the elegant surroundings. "We're a bit travel-worn, I'm afraid." "Not to worry," Brielle smiled warmly. "Your cabin is ready, and the welcome reception doesn't begin for another 3 hours. Plenty of time to refresh and relax." She knelt to Kieran's level. "And you must be the young man Miss Frost has been excited to meet. I hear you're interested in astronomy." Kieran nodded enthusiastically. "I brought my telescope. Mom said I can look at the stars from the mountains because there's less atmosphere in the way." "That's absolutely right," Brielle said. "And we have a special stargazing event for the children tomorrow night, led by a local astronomer. Would you like me to add your name to the list?" "Yes, please." Kieran bounced on his toes, then turned to Nora. "Can I, Mom? Please." "Of course." Nora smiled, touched by the thoughtful planning. Whatever else had changed about Imogen, she'd clearly remembered Nora mentioning her son's passion for space. Brielle led them through the property to a charming cabin overlooking the lake. Inside, they found a spacious living area with a stone fireplace, a kitchenette stocked with snacks and beverages, and 2 bedrooms, the smaller one already prepared with space-themed bedding and a desk positioned by the window, perfect for setting up a telescope. "This is amazing," Nora said, genuinely impressed. "Please thank Imogen, Ms. Frost, for such thoughtful accommodations." "I will, though I should mention that the cabin assignments and special touches were arranged by Mr. Lockhart himself," Brielle replied. "He's been very involved in ensuring each guest's comfort." Nora froze, her hand still on the doorknob of her bedroom. "I'm sorry, did you say Lockhart?" "Yes, Mr. Thaddeus Lockhart, Ms. Frost's fiancé," Brielle confirmed, checking something on her tablet. "Is everything all right, Miss Sinclair? You've gone quite pale." Nora's mind raced, trying to process this bombshell. Thaddeus Lockhart, her Thaddeus, was marrying Imogen? Her old friend Imogen? It wasn't possible. It had to be a different Thaddeus Lockhart. The name wasn't common, but surely there could be more than one. "Mom," Kieran's voice broke through her panic. "Are you okay?" Nora forced herself to breathe, to smile, to nod. "Yes, just a bit tired from the drive." "Brielle, could you remind me? I don't think Imogen ever mentioned her fiancé's full name in our correspondence." "He's in tech, correct?" "Yes, he founded Lockhart Innovations," Brielle said, clearly proud to be working on such a high-profile wedding. "The quantum encryption company? They just went public last year. It was all over the business news." It was him. Quantum encryption had been Thaddeus's obsession back when they were together, when his first company was failing and he was desperately seeking the next big idea. Back when Nora had casually suggested he look into security applications after reading an article about quantum computing, never imagining that throwaway comment would eventually become the foundation of a billion-dollar company. A company now run by the father of her child, who was currently unpacking his telescope, blissfully unaware that his mysterious, absent father was about to marry her college best friend. "Miss Sinclair." Brielle was looking at her with concern. "Would you like me to have the resort doctor check on you?" No, Nora said quickly, pulling herself together. "Just low blood sugar from the drive. I'll have something to eat and rest before the reception." "Of course." Brielle didn't look entirely convinced, but maintained her professional demeanor. "The welcome reception begins at 6 in the Lakeside Pavilion. Casual attire is fine. If you need anything at all, just call the front desk and ask for me." After Brielle left, Nora sank onto the sofa, her mind a tornado of questions and implications. Had Imogen known? Had she deliberately kept Thaddeus's identity from Nora? Or was this some cosmic coincidence, the universe's idea of a cruel joke? And what was she supposed to do now? Show up at the reception and come face to face with Kieran's father for the first time in 9 years? Pretend she didn't know him? Reveal their history to Imogen on the eve of her wedding? "Mom, this place is so cool." Kieran emerged from his room, oblivious to her internal crisis. "There's a welcome basket with space stuff in my room. Look, I got a NASA t-shirt and a book about constellations." Nora forced a smile. "That's wonderful, sweetie. Why don't you read your new book while I unpack? Then we can get ready for the party tonight." As Kieran settled on his bed with the book, Nora retreated to her own room and closed the door, pulling out her phone with shaking hands. She needed more information before she decided what to do. A quick search confirmed everything Brielle had said. Thaddeus Lockhart, founder and CEO of Lockhart Innovations, tech wunderkind who had transformed a failing startup into a cybersecurity powerhouse through pioneering work in quantum encryption. His company had gone public last year in one of the most successful IPOs of the decade. Forbes estimated his personal net worth at just over $2 billion. And there, in a Society page article from 6 months ago, was a photo of him with Imogen at a charity gala, her hand resting on his arm, an enormous diamond glinting on her finger. The caption read, "Tech titan Thaddeus Lockhart and interior designer Imogen Frost announce engagement at annual Metropolitan Museum benefit." Interior designer. So Imogen had pursued their shared dream after all. And somehow, in the process, she'd ended up engaged to the man who had once been the center of Nora's world. The man who had no idea he had a son who was currently in the next room, excited about a welcome basket personally arranged by his own father. Nora's phone buzzed with a text from Imogen. "You're here. Can't wait to see you at the reception. So much to catch up on. XO." Staring at the message, Nora realized she had only a few hours to make an impossible decision. She could pack up and leave now, before anyone saw them, citing a family emergency. She could attend, but keep Kieran away from all events where Thaddeus might be present. Or she could face this head-on, whatever the consequences. None of the options felt right. All of them felt like continuing a lie that had gone on far too long. With a deep breath, Nora began unpacking their clothes, buying herself time to think. As she hung her dress for the reception, a simple blue silk that suddenly seemed woefully inadequate for the occasion, she caught sight of herself in the mirror. The woman who stared back looked scared, uncertain, a far cry from the confident professional she presented to the world. "You can do this," she whispered to her reflection. For Kieran, whatever happened next, her son's well-being had to come first. It always had. The lakeside pavilion glowed with hundreds of twinkling lights as Nora and Kieran approached for the welcome reception. Soft music drifted through the evening air, mingling with the sounds of laughter and conversation from the guests already gathered inside. Kieran, freshly showered and dressed in his nicest button-down shirt and khakis, practically vibrated with excitement. "Do you think they'll have those little hot dogs wrapped in pastry?" he asked, adjusting his glasses. Joey had those at his birthday party and said they're what fancy people eat. "They're called pigs in blankets," Nora said, smoothing down his perpetually unruly copper hair. "And if they don't have them, I promise we'll find something equally delicious." At the entrance to the pavilion, a server offered them flutes of champagne and sparkling cider. Nora took a steadying sip of champagne while scanning the crowd for either Imogen or Thaddeus, her heart hammering against her ribs. "Nora? Nora Sinclair." A familiar voice called from behind them. Nora turned to find Imogen hurrying toward them, resplendent in a champagne-colored cocktail dress, her once wild blonde curls now sleekly styled into an elegant updo. 9 years had treated her well. She looked polished and confident, though Nora could still see traces of the passionate, impulsive girl she'd once shared an apartment with. "Imogen," Nora managed, accepting her friend's enthusiastic embrace. "Congratulations. Everything is beautiful, isn't it?" Imogen beamed, gesturing around the pavilion. "I still can't believe this is my life sometimes. But forget all that. Let me look at you. Still gorgeous as ever. And this must be Kieran." She knelt gracefully to Kieran's level, extending her hand. "I'm Imogen, your mom's old friend. I've heard so much about you." Kieran shook her hand solemnly. "It's nice to meet you. Congratulations on getting married. I've never been to a wedding before." "Well, I'm honored that mine is your first," Imogen said warmly. "I've arranged for all sorts of fun activities for the kids this weekend. And wait until you taste the cake tomorrow. It's astronomical." Kieran's eyes widened at the space pun. "Do you like astronomy too?" "I know a little." Imogen winked at Nora. "Your mom mentioned you're quite the expert. Perhaps you can show me some constellations while you're here?" "I brought my telescope," Kieran said excitedly. "And there's a special stargazing event tomorrow." "I know. I helped plan it," Imogen said, straightening up. "Now, let me introduce you both around. The children's area is just through those doors, with supervision and activities if you get bored with all the grown-up talk." Kieran. As Imogen led them deeper into the pavilion, Nora fought to keep her expression neutral while her eyes continued their desperate search for Thaddeus. "Your fiancé, is he here yet?" she asked, trying to sound merely curious. "Thad's running a bit late," Imogen replied. "Last-minute work crisis. The price of marrying a CEO, I suppose. But he should be here any minute. You two will get along famously. He's brilliant like you, always thinking 10 steps ahead of everyone else." Nora nodded mechanically, relief and dread warring within her. Every minute without Thaddeus was both a reprieve and an extension of her anxiety. "How did you two meet?" she asked, realizing she needed as much information as possible before the inevitable confrontation. "At a charity auction, of all places," Imogen said, guiding them toward a table laden with appetizers, including, Nora noted with a hint of hysteria, pigs in blankets. "I was designing the event space pro bono, and he was the keynote speaker. We got talking about quantum physics, of all things." "Quantum physics?" Nora couldn't help but interject. "That doesn't sound like the Imogen I knew." Imogen laughed, the sound tinkling like the champagne bubbles in Nora's glass. "Oh, I don't understand a word of it, darling. But I've become very good at nodding intelligently while powerful men explain things. Useful skill in the design world. Clients love to mansplain their own taste to you." This glimpse of the old, irreverent Imogen was strangely comforting. Perhaps she hadn't changed as much as Nora had feared. "Anyway," Imogen continued, "we had this instant connection. He asked me to dinner, and the rest is history. Whirlwind romance, really. We've only been together a year. A year." They'd gotten engaged after knowing each other less than 6 months. The timeline did nothing to ease Nora's concern. "That seems fast," she ventured carefully. "When you know, you know." Imogen shrugged, then lowered her voice conspiratorially. "And between us, when a brilliant billionaire who looks like a Greek god wants to put a ring on it, you don't ask him to slow down." Before Nora could respond to this surprisingly mercenary statement from her once idealistic friend, Kieran tugged at her sleeve. "Mom, can I try these little hot dog things? And then can I go see the kids' area? They have a telescope set up on the deck." "Of course, sweetheart," Nora said, grateful for the momentary distraction. "Just stay where the supervisors can see you, okay?" As Kieran darted off with a plate of hors d'oeuvres, Imogen clinked her champagne flute against Nora's. "He's absolutely adorable, Nora. Those eyes. And so well-mannered. You've done an amazing job with him." "Thank you," Nora said, her throat tight. "He's the best thing that ever happened to me." "And his father? Still not in the picture?" Imogen asked, her tone casual, but her eyes sharp with interest. The question caught Nora off guard. "No, he's not involved." She hesitated, then added, He doesn't actually know about Kieran." Imogen's perfectly shaped eyebrows rose. "Really? That's quite a secret to keep. May I ask why?" Nora took another sip of champagne, buying herself time. How much should she reveal? "It's complicated. The timing was wrong. He was going through a difficult professional period when I found out I was pregnant, and then once he rebounded, it just seemed too late to drop that bombshell." Imogen mused. Men can be surprisingly adaptable when it comes to discovering they have children. Especially successful men. They tend to view offspring as extensions of their legacy. There was something odd about Imogen's tone, something that raised the hairs on the back of Nora's neck. Before she could analyze it further, a ripple of excitement moved through the pavilion. Heads turned toward the entrance. Voices hushed, then rose in renewed conversation. "Speaking of successful men," Imogen said, her face lighting up. "There's mine now. Come, you have to meet him." She grabbed Nora's hand, pulling her through the crowd toward the entrance. Nora felt as though she were moving through molasses, her feet leaden, her pulse thundering in her ears. And then the crowd parted, and there he was. Thaddeus Lockhart stood in the entrance to the pavilion, taller than she remembered, his dark hair now threaded with distinguished silver at the temples. His features were more defined. The boyish charm of his 20s evolved into the commanding presence of a man at the height of his powers. He wore his success like a bespoke suit, which, she noted distantly, he was actually wearing, the tailoring impeccable, the subtle pinstripe emphasizing his lean frame. He was nodding at something an older man was saying to him, his expression polite but distracted, until he caught sight of Imogen approaching. His face transformed with genuine warmth, and Nora felt a stab of something that might have been jealousy, or perhaps just the pain of witnessing what she'd once had and lost. "There you are," Imogen said, reaching up to kiss him briefly. "Darling, there's someone special I want you to meet. My oldest friend from design school. We were practically joined at the hip for 4 years." Thaddeus turned his attention to Nora, his expression shifting from polite interest to blank shock in the space of a heartbeat. He went utterly still, the color draining from his face. "Nora," he said, her name barely audible. "You know each other?" Imogen looked between them, confusion evident in her expression. For an excruciating moment, no one spoke. The ambient noise of the party seemed to fade away, leaving only the roaring in Nora's ears and the weight of 9 years of secrets pressing down on her chest. "We've met," Nora finally managed, her voice remarkably steady despite the earthquake happening inside her. "A long time ago, in New York. Small world," Imogen said with a nervous laugh. "Thad, darling, you never mentioned knowing Nora." Thaddeus seemed to shake himself from his stupor. "It was brief," he said, his eyes never leaving Nora's face. Before I started Lockhart Innovations, we moved in similar circles for a while. The understatement was so enormous that Nora might have laughed if she weren't terrified of becoming hysterical. Similar circles, as if they hadn't shared an apartment for nearly a year. As if he hadn't been the one to hold her when she cried over her father's death. As if they hadn't planned a future together before it all fell apart. How fascinating, Imogen said, looking between them with increasing curiosity. You'll have to tell me that story sometime. But Thad, you haven't properly met Nora's son yet. He's around here somewhere. Mom, as if on cue, Kieran's voice rang out across the pavilion. Mom, come quick. They've got the telescope set up, and you can see Jupiter's moons. Nora turned to see her son, their son, rushing toward them, his face alight with excitement, blissfully unaware of the emotional tsunami about to break over all their lives. Thaddeus's sharp intake of breath told her the exact moment he registered Kieran's age, his copper hair, his familiar gray eyes behind those small glasses. She saw the mental calculations happening behind his shocked expression. 9 years since they'd last seen each other. 8-year-old boy. The timing, the undeniable resemblance. Mommy, is that man staring at us? Kieran tugged at his mother's sleeve, his curious eyes fixed on the tall figure across the ballroom. Nora felt the air vanish from her lungs as she turned. 9 years dissolved in an instant. There he stood, Thaddeus Lockhart, looking even more devastating in a tailored tuxedo than he had in her memories. The same chiseled jawline. The same piercing gray eyes that had once looked at her with such passion, now wide with shock. Nora, his voice carried across the rehearsal dinner, causing heads to turn. Is he? Her hands trembled as she gripped her son's shoulders protectively. We need to leave. Now. But why? Kieran's innocent question hung in the air. Who is that man? Before she could answer, her college friend Imogen appeared, radiant in her pre-wedding gown, linking her arm through Thaddeus's. Nora, I see you've spotted my fiancé. Nora's world tilted on its axis as the horrible truth crystallized. The mysterious billionaire CEO her friend was marrying tomorrow was the same man who had walked away from her 9 years ago. The same man who had never known he had fathered a son who now stood beside her, with his father's unmistakable gray eyes. The rehearsal dinner had become a blur of tension and forced smiles after that initial confrontation. Somehow, Nora had managed to introduce Kieran to both Imogen and Thaddeus without revealing the truth, though she caught Thaddeus staring at her son throughout the evening with an expression of dawning recognition that grew more certain by the minute. Now, back in their cabin with Kieran finally asleep after the excitement of the evening, Nora paced the small living room, waiting for the knock she knew would come. Thaddeus wouldn't let this revelation go without confronting her. She knew him too well, or at least, she had once. When the soft knock finally came, she was almost relieved. The waiting had been excruciating. She opened the door to find Thaddeus standing on the porch, his formal attire exchanged for a simple button-down shirt and jeans that reminded her painfully of the man she'd once known, before power and wealth had transformed him. May I come in? His voice was controlled, but she could hear the tension vibrating beneath the surface. Nora stepped aside wordlessly, closing the door quietly behind him. For a moment, they simply looked at each other, the weight of 9 years and countless unspoken words hanging between them. He's mine, isn't he? Thaddeus finally broke the silence, his voice barely above a whisper. Kieran, he's my son. It wasn't really a question, but Nora nodded anyway. Yes. The confirmation seemed to hit him physically. He sank onto the sofa, running a hand through his hair in a gesture so familiar it made her heart ache. How old is he? Exactly. 8 years and 4 months. Thaddeus did the math silently, his expression shifting as the timeline became clear. You were pregnant when I left for the West Coast investment meeting. I didn't know then, Nora said, remaining standing, needing the physical advantage of height in this conversation. I found out 3 weeks later, after you'd already decided not to come back. Not to come. Thaddeus looked up sharply. Is that what you thought? That I decided not to come back to you? That's what happened, Nora said, confusion mingling with the defensive anger she'd carried for years. You called from San Francisco, said you'd had an epiphany about the company, that you were staying to rebuild from scratch. You said, and I quote, "This is my one shot, Nora. I have to take it." And you took that to mean I was leaving you? Incredulity colored his voice. I meant I was staying an extra 2 weeks to secure the funding. I called you every day. Then suddenly you stopped answering. Your number was disconnected. You'd moved out of our apartment. You vanished. Nora stared at him, her carefully constructed narrative of abandonment beginning to crack. Your emails stopped. You never tried to find me. I sent dozens of emails. I called your friends, your brother. No one knew where you'd gone, or they wouldn't tell me. Thaddeus stood again, agitation driving him to pace the small room. I thought you'd left me, Nora. When I finally got back to New York, all your things were gone. No note. Nothing. Nora felt as though the floor had disappeared beneath her feet. That's not possible. I was there for weeks after your call. I left messages. I emailed you about the pregnancy. You never responded. What? Thaddeus stopped pacing, his face pale with shock. You told me about Kieran? I tried to, Nora said, her voice hollow. I sent 3 emails. The last one said that I understood your silence was an answer in itself, and that I wouldn't contact you again. They stared at each other, 9 years of misunderstanding stretching between them like a vast, unbridgeable chasm. Atlas, Thaddeus said suddenly. What? Atlas Holdings. The investment group in San Francisco. They insisted I use their secure servers for all communication during negotiations. Military-grade security protocols. He ran his hands through his hair again, realization dawning. My personal email was automatically forwarded through their system during that period. If there was a technical glitch, you're saying you never got my emails? Nora's voice was faint. Any of them. I swear to you, Nora. I never knew you were pregnant. I never knew about Kieran. His voice broke on their son's name. I would never have abandoned my own child. Or you. I loved you. The simple past tense, loved, not love, somehow made the statement more believable. This wasn't a man trying to win her back. This was a man grappling with a truth that had upended his understanding of the past 9 years. Nora sank into the armchair opposite him, her legs no longer able to support her. This can't be happening. All this time, I thought you knew and didn't care. And I thought you'd left me because my company was failing. Thaddeus looked shell-shocked. I threw myself into rebuilding it, into proving I wasn't a failure. And then when it finally succeeded beyond my wildest dreams, I looked up and you were gone. I tried to find you again then, but it was as if you'd disappeared. I changed my name back to Sinclair after I left New York, Nora admitted. I moved 3 times in 2 years. I didn't want to be found. By me. By anyone who knew me before. I was pregnant, alone, and humiliated. I wanted a fresh start. Thaddeus nodded slowly, processing this. Then his expression sharpened with a new thought. Last night, at the reception, you recognized me immediately, didn't you? You knew Imogen was marrying me before you arrived. Nora shook her head. I had no idea until we got here. The wedding coordinator mentioned your name. Until then, Imogen had just referred to you as her fiancé. And you still came to the reception, knowing you'd have to face me. What choice did I have? Nora spread her hands helplessly. We were already here. Kieran was excited about the weekend. I couldn't just disappear without explanations. Thaddeus absorbed this, then asked the question that had clearly been burning inside him since the moment he saw Kieran. What is he like? My son. The possessive pronoun sent a complicated ripple of emotions through Nora, defensiveness, sadness, and an unexpected touch of relief at finally sharing the weight of parenthood, even if only in conversation. He's brilliant, she said softly. Curious about everything. Loves space, science, figuring out how things work. He's kind, thoughtful, sometimes too serious for an 8-year-old, but then he'll say something completely silly and remind me he's still a child. A small smile touched her lips. He hates green vegetables, but will eat them if I explain the nutritional benefits in detail. He sleeps with a nightlight shaped like Saturn. He wants to be an astronaut or a quantum physicist, depending on the day. Each detail seemed to hit Thaddeus like a physical blow, gifts received and mourned simultaneously. He has my eyes, he said quietly. And your mind, Nora acknowledged. The way he approaches problems, how he gets that little furrow between his brows when he's concentrating. That's all you. And he doesn't know about me? He knows your name, that you're a businessman, that you work all over the world. Nora met his gaze directly. I've never spoken badly of you to him, Thaddeus. I've always been careful to keep my own feelings separate from how I talk about you to Kieran. Thank you for that. The simple gratitude in his voice was genuine. Most women wouldn't have been so fair in your position. A silence fell between them, both absorbing the seismic revelations of the past few minutes. Finally, Thaddeus asked the question that would determine everything that followed. What do we do now, Nora? She took a deep breath, considering her answer carefully. I don't know. This is uncharted territory. Do we tell him? Kieran, we can't just spring something like this on him in the middle of a wedding weekend, Nora said, protective instincts flaring. He needs time, preparation. And Imogen. God, Imogen. What about her? You're marrying her tomorrow. Thaddeus's expression turned troubled. I need to talk to her. She deserves to know the truth before we proceed any further. The truth could devastate her, Nora pointed out. Finding out on the eve of her wedding that her fiancé has a child with her old friend? That's the kind of revelation that destroys relationships. Would you prefer I marry her without telling her? Start our life together with a lie of this magnitude? Of course not, Nora said, frustrated. I'm just saying that timing matters. Maybe wait until after the wedding. Tell her privately during your honeymoon. Thaddeus studied her with a penetrating gaze that had always made her feel transparent. Is that really about protecting Imogen, or is it about protecting yourself from an uncomfortable situation? The question stung with its accuracy. Before Nora could formulate a response, a small voice came from the hallway leading to the bedrooms. Mom? Who are you talking to? They both turned to see Kieran standing in the doorway in his space-themed pajamas, hair rumpled from sleep, glasses slightly askew. His curious gaze shifted from his mother to Thaddeus, recognition dawning on his young face. You're the man getting married, he said to Thaddeus. Ms. Frost's fiancé. Yes, Thaddeus replied, his voice carefully controlled despite the emotion Nora could see him fighting. I'm Thaddeus Lockhart. You can call me Thad, if you like. I'm Kieran, the boy said, moving further into the room. Why are you in our cabin so late? Is something wrong? Nora and Thaddeus exchanged a quick, panicked glance. This moment had arrived far sooner than either had anticipated. Nothing's wrong, sweetheart, Nora said, moving to her son's side. Mr. Lockhart and I were just catching up. We knew each other a long time ago, before you were born. In New York? Kieran asked, his quick mind making connections. Yes, in New York, Thaddeus confirmed, unable to take his eyes off his son. Kieran studied Thaddeus with undisguised interest. My mom said my dad lives in New York. Did you know him? The innocent question landed like a grenade in the room. Nora froze, caught between truth and the protective instinct to shield her son from too much, too soon. Thaddeus looked to her, clearly deferring to her judgment on how to proceed. The gesture, his recognition of her authority as Kieran's primary parent, earned him a small measure of gratitude from Nora. Kieran, she said carefully, guiding him to sit beside her on the sofa. This is actually a very complicated grown-up situation. Mr. Lockhart and I have some things to discuss, and then we need to talk with you. But it's very late now, and I think this conversation would be better in the morning when we're all rested. Don't you agree? Kieran looked between them, his expression suggesting he knew something significant was being withheld. But he nodded slowly. I guess so. But you promised to tell me tomorrow? The whole truth. The whole truth, Nora confirmed, her heart aching with the weight of what that would mean. Okay. Kieran stood, then hesitated, turning back to Thaddeus. Do you like astronomy, Mr. Lockhart? The question, so innocent and yet so loaded with meaning, brought a sheen of moisture to Thaddeus's eyes that he quickly blinked away. Very much, he replied. In fact, I studied astrophysics before I switched to computer science. Kieran's eyes widened with excitement. Really? I'm building a model of the solar system for science class. Maybe you could help me sometime? Mom tries, but she always gets the order of the planets mixed up. I'd like that, Thaddeus said softly. Very much. Cool. Kieran turned toward his bedroom, then paused again. Good night, Mom. Good night, Mr. Lockhart. Good night, Kieran. They replied in unison, watching as he disappeared back down the hallway. When they heard his bedroom door close, Nora released a shaky breath. That was close. He's remarkable, Thaddeus said, his voice thick with emotion. So poised, so articulate. He's also extremely perceptive, Nora warned. He knows something's going on. We won't be able to put him off for long. Then we tell him tomorrow, Thaddeus said decisively. Together. And I'll speak with Imogen tonight. Tonight? It's almost midnight. This can't wait, Nora. She deserves to know before things progress any further. He stood, determination evident in every line of his body. I'll come back in the morning, around 9. We can talk to Kieran together, and then figure out next steps. Nora nodded reluctantly, knowing he was right despite her desire to delay the inevitable confrontations. All right, 9 o'clock. At the door, Thaddeus paused, turning back to her with an expression that was difficult to read. For what it's worth, Nora, you've done an extraordinary job with him. I'm sorry I wasn't there to help, but I'm here now, and I want to be part of his life. The simple declaration, devoid of accusations or recriminations, touched something deep within her. Good night, Thaddeus. After he left, Nora sank back onto the sofa, her mind replaying their conversation. 9 years of anger and hurt had been built on a misunderstanding, emails never received, calls never returned, each believing themselves abandoned by the other. And in the middle of it all, a child who had grown up without his father due to nothing more than a technological glitch, and 2 people too hurt to push past their pride and confusion. The tragedy of it all was almost too much to bear. Nora checked on Kieran, finding him already asleep again, one arm flung over his space encyclopedia. She gently removed his glasses and tucked the blanket around him, her heart full of love and fear for what tomorrow would bring. Whatever happened, his world was about to change irrevocably. She only hoped he was resilient enough to weather the storm. Back in the living room, Nora poured herself a glass of water and stepped onto the cabin's small deck. The night was clear, the stars brilliant against the velvet blackness of the sky. Somewhere out there was Jupiter with its moons, the sight that had so excited Kieran earlier. The vast perspective of space had always humbled her, reminding her that human dramas, no matter how all-consuming they felt, were infinitesimally small in the grand scheme of the universe. Her phone vibrated in her pocket with a text. She expected it to be from Thaddeus, perhaps reconsidering their plan for the morning. Instead, she saw Imogen's name on the screen. We need to talk. Now. My cabin. Come alone. Nora's stomach dropped. The tone was unmistakable, Imogen knew. Thaddeus had already told her. With a sense of dread, Nora texted back a simple "on my way," and went inside to ask the night attendant assigned to their section of cabins to listen for Kieran while she stepped out briefly. Imogen's cabin, or rather, suite, was in the main lodge, a short walk from Nora's. As she approached the ornate double doors, Nora steeled herself for what promised to be a difficult conversation. Before she could knock, the door swung open to reveal Imogen, still in her evening dress, but with her makeup smudged from what had clearly been tears. "Come in," she said, her voice tight with controlled emotion. The suite was expansive and luxurious, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the moonlit lake. A half-empty bottle of champagne sat on the coffee table alongside a crystal flute. There was no sign of Thaddeus. "Where is he?" Nora asked, looking around the suite. "Taking a walk," Imogen replied, closing the door behind them. "He needed time to process." "As do I." "Imogen, I can explain, can you?" Imogen cut her off, moving to the windows to stare out at the lake. "Can you explain why my oldest friend never mentioned that she had a child with my fiancé? Can you explain why you showed up at my wedding knowing full well who I was marrying, yet said nothing?" "I didn't know," Nora said quickly. "I swear, Imogen, I had no idea Thaddeus was your fiancé until we arrived here. You never mentioned his name in any of our correspondence." Imogen turned back to her, skepticism written across her features. "And when you found out, why not come to me immediately?" "I was in shock," Nora admitted. "I was trying to figure out how to handle it without ruining your wedding, without traumatizing my son." "Our son." Imogen's correction was pointed. "Yours and Thad's." "Yes." Imogen took a deep breath, visibly gathering herself. "He told me everything. About your relationship in New York. About the misunderstanding afterward. About how he never knew about Kieran until tonight." "It's the truth," Nora said quietly. "All of it. I believe him," Imogen said, surprising Nora. "Thad wouldn't lie about something like this. He's many things, but not a liar." An uncomfortable silence stretched between them, broken only by the distant sound of waves lapping against the shore below. Finally, Imogen spoke again, her voice softer but no less intense. "Did you love him?" Back then, the question caught Nora off guard. "Yes," she answered honestly. "Very much." "And now?" Nora hesitated, uncertain how to respond. Now I hardly know him. 9 years is a long time. We're different people. Imogen nodded slowly, absorbing this. You know what the worst part is? When he told me about Kieran, about you, I saw something in his eyes I've never seen before. A light, a connection. It made me realize that in all our time together, he's never looked at me that way. Imogen. No, let me finish. She took a steadying breath. I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. Did you come here to win him back? Is that what this is about? What? No. Nora was genuinely shocked by the accusation. Imogen, I had no idea he was your fiancé. I came because you invited me, because you were once my dearest friend, and because Kieran was excited about the trip. That's all. Imogen studied her face, searching for any sign of deception. What she saw must have satisfied her, because some of the tension left her shoulders. I believe you, she said finally, which makes this whole situation even more cruelly ironic. She moved to the coffee table and poured herself more champagne, not offering any to Nora. Do you know how Thad and I really met? At a charity auction, Nora replied, recalling their earlier conversation. You were designing the space. Yes, but do you know which charity? Imogen took a long sip of champagne. The Metropolitan Fertility Foundation. They fund research and treatment for families struggling with infertility. The significance wasn't lost on Nora. Oh, yes, oh. The universe has quite the sense of humor, doesn't it? Imogen's laugh held no mirth. I've been working with them for years. Personal interest. You've been trying to have children? Nora asked gently. Since I was 25, Imogen confirmed. Endometriosis. 3 surgeries. 4 rounds of IVF. No success. I'm so sorry, Imogen. I had no idea. Why would you? We haven't really been in each other's lives for years. She shrugged, but the casual gesture couldn't disguise the pain beneath it. When I met Thad at that event, it felt like fate. He was so passionate about the cause, so understanding about my situation. We connected immediately, and when he proposed, he told me it didn't matter if we never had biological children, we could adopt, use surrogates, whatever it took. He just wanted a family with me. Each word was a fresh cut to Nora's heart, revealing the depth of the damage their situation would cause. He sounds like he truly cares for you. He does, Imogen acknowledged. In his way. But I'm not sure it's enough anymore. What do you mean? I mean that seeing him with Kieran, even for those few minutes at the reception, it changed something. Or rather, it revealed something that was already there. Imogen set down her champagne flute with deliberate care. He wants his son, Nora, and I can't blame him for that. But where does that leave me? The infertile fiancé who can't give him children of his own. That's not fair to yourself, Nora protested. Your worth isn't determined by your ability to have children, isn't it? Isn't that exactly what society tells women? What men ultimately want? Imogen's bitter laugh held years of accumulated pain. I've spent a decade trying to prove that theory wrong, and now I find out my fiancé already has a son with my college roommate. If that's not cosmic irony, I don't know what is. Nora moved closer, reaching for her friend's hand. What did Thaddeus say? About the wedding. That it's my decision, Imogen replied, allowing the contact. That he'll understand if I want to postpone or cancel. That he still wants to marry me, but he also wants to be part of Kieran's life, and he knows that complicates things. What do you want to do? Imogen looked at her directly, vulnerability evident in her eyes. I don't know. Part of me wants to go through with it, to claim what I've worked so hard for, what I deserve. Another part wonders if I'd always be second place in his heart now. If every time he looks at me, he'll be thinking of the family he could have had with you. That's not fair to him either, Nora said gently. People can love in different ways. His feelings for Kieran don't diminish what he feels for you. Perhaps, Imogen conceded, but they change the equation, and I need to decide if I can live with those new terms. She squeezed Nora's hand, then released it. I need time to think. Alone. Of course. Nora stood, recognizing the dismissal. For what it's worth, I'm truly sorry about all of this. The last thing I ever wanted was to hurt you, especially on what should be the happiest weekend of your life. As she reached the door, Imogen called after her. Nora, do you still have feelings for him? For Thad? Nora paused, the question hitting her like a physical blow. Did she? The man she'd seen tonight was both familiar and a stranger, the same intense gray eyes and thoughtful manner, but tempered by years of experience she hadn't shared. The connection between them was undeniable, But was it merely the echo of old feelings, or something that could reignite? I don't know, she answered honestly. But even if I did, I wouldn't act on them. Your friendship meant too much to me once. I'd like to think that still counts for something. Imogen nodded, a sad smile touching her lips. Get some sleep, Nora. Tomorrow's going to be a long day for all of us. Nora returned to her cabin, her mind whirling with the events of the night. The attendant assured her that Kieran had slept peacefully in her absence. After checking on him once more, she retreated to her own bedroom, though sleep seemed an impossible dream. As she lay awake staring at the ceiling, Nora tried to imagine what the morning would bring. How would Kieran react to learning Thaddeus was his father? What would Imogen decide about the wedding? And where did all of this leave her? The woman who had built a life around the absence of a man who had never intentionally abandoned her. The questions circled relentlessly, offering no answers, until exhaustion finally claimed her in the early hours of the morning. Have you ever been caught in a triangle of friendship, love, and impossible choices? Share your thoughts in the comments below, because sometimes the most difficult decisions are those where every option leads to someone getting hurt. Nora awoke to sunlight streaming through the curtains and the smell of coffee brewing. For a moment, she was disoriented, the events of the previous night feeling like a strange dream. Then reality crashed back, and she sat up with a jolt. Kieran, Thaddeus, the impending conversation that would change everything. Checking the time, she saw it was nearly 8:30. Thaddeus would arrive in half an hour. She quickly showered and dressed, trying to prepare herself mentally for what was to come. When she emerged from her bedroom, she found Kieran already up, sitting at the small kitchen counter with a bowl of cereal and his space encyclopedia. "Morning, Mom," he said, looking up from his book. "I made coffee." "I see that," she smiled, touched by his thoughtfulness. "Thank you, sweetheart. Mr. Lockhart is coming over this morning, isn't he?" Kieran asked, watching her carefully over the rim of his glasses. "To finish your talk from last night." "Yes," Nora confirmed, pouring herself a cup of the coffee, strong, the way she liked it. Kieran was always attentive to such details. "He'll be here at 9. We have something important to discuss with you." "Is it about my dad?" The direct question caught her off guard, though perhaps it shouldn't have. Kieran had always been perceptive, and the tension of the previous night had been obvious even to a child. "What makes you ask that?" she hedged, buying time. Kieran shrugged with a casualness that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Mr. Lockhart was looking at me weird all night at the reception, and then he came here super late to talk to you. And you both got all quiet when I asked if he knew my dad." He pushed his cereal around the bowl. "Plus, he has eyes like mine. I saw it in the pictures of him on Ms. Frost's phone." Nora's heart squeezed painfully. Of course he had noticed, her brilliant, observant son who missed nothing. "Yes," she said quietly. "It is about your dad." Kieran nodded, processing this confirmation. "Is Mr. Lockhart my dad?" The simple, direct question hung in the air between them. Nora had imagined this moment 1,000 different ways over the years, but never like this, in a luxurious cabin the morning before his father's wedding to another woman. "Yes," she said finally, deciding that honesty was the only possible path forward. "Thaddeus is your father." Kieran's expression remained remarkably composed, though she saw a flicker of emotion in his eyes, relief, perhaps, at having his suspicion confirmed. Or maybe something deeper, more complex. "Why didn't he ever come see me before?" he asked, the question heartbreakingly simple. "He didn't know about you," Nora explained gently. "I thought I had told him, but my messages never reached him. He only found out last night, when he saw you at the reception." "Really?" Hope and skepticism warred in Kieran's young face. "He didn't know about me at all?" "Really," Nora confirmed. "If he had known, I believe he would have been part of your life from the beginning." Kieran seemed to consider this carefully, his gaze dropping to his cereal bowl. "Is that why you're telling me now? Because he wants to be part of my life?" "Yes," Nora said, moving to sit beside him. "He very much wants to know you, Kieran. But we both thought you should have a say in how that happens. It's a lot to take in, and no one would blame you if you needed time. Does this mean we're staying for the wedding?" The question was so practical, so unexpectedly mundane amidst the emotional complexity of the situation, that Nora couldn't help but smile. "That's one of the things we need to figure out. A lot depends on what Miss Frost decides." "Because she just found out her fiancé has a kid she didn't know about," Kieran reasoned, connecting the dots with his usual quickness. That's kind of a big deal before you marry someone. Yes, it is, Nora agreed, constantly amazed by her son's emotional intelligence. She's thinking about what she wants to do. Kieran nodded thoughtfully. I hope she still gets married. She seemed really happy yesterday. Before Nora could respond to this surprisingly mature observation, a knock sounded at the door. Kieran's eyes immediately darted toward the sound, a mixture of nervousness and anticipation crossing his face. Ready? Nora asked him softly. I think so, he replied, straightening his glasses with a gesture that reminded her painfully of his father. Nora opened the door to find Thaddeus standing on the porch, looking as though he hadn't slept any more than she had. He was casually dressed in jeans and a soft gray sweater that matched his eyes, Kieran's eyes. Good morning, he said, his gaze moving past her to where Kieran sat at the counter. I hope I'm not too early. Not at all, Nora replied, stepping aside to let him in. We were just having breakfast. Would you like some coffee? Please, Thaddeus said, moving into the cabin with a carefulness that spoke volumes about his awareness of the significance of this moment. An awkward silence fell as Nora poured him coffee. Kieran and Thaddeus studied each other openly, neither quite knowing how to begin. I like your sweater, Kieran said finally, breaking the tension. Gray is my favorite color. Mine too, Thaddeus replied, a small smile softening his features. It's the color of possibility, neither black nor white, but something more complex in between. Kieran's eyes widened slightly at this philosophical observation. Yeah, exactly. That's what I always think too. Mom says it's because it matches my eyes, but I think it's deeper than that. Sounds like we think alike, Thaddeus said, accepting the coffee Nora handed him with a grateful nod. Mom told me you're my dad, Kieran stated directly, causing both adults to freeze momentarily. She said you didn't know about me until yesterday. Is that true? Thaddeus set down his coffee carefully, giving the question the serious consideration it deserved. Yes, it's true. If I had known about you, Kieran, I would have been in your life from the very beginning. Not knowing you existed, it's the greatest regret of my life. Kieran absorbed this, his expression thoughtful. So it wasn't that you didn't want me? No, Thaddeus said emphatically, emotion thickening his voice. Never that. I would have wanted you more than anything in the world. Something in Kieran's posture relaxed slightly at this assurance, a tension he'd carried for so long that neither he nor Nora had fully recognized it until it began to ease. I have a lot of questions, he said. I'm sure you do, Thaddeus replied. And I promise to answer every single one as honestly as I can, for as long as you want to ask them. Starting with, Kieran took a deep breath, as if gathering courage. Are you still getting married today? To Ms. Frost. The directness of the question seemed to surprise Thaddeus. He glanced at Nora, who gave a small nod of encouragement. I don't know, he answered honestly. Imogen is still deciding what she wants to do. Finding out about you was a big surprise for her too. Because she wants kids of her own, Kieran reasoned. And finding out you already have one might make her feel weird. Both adults stared at him, startled by his insight. That's partly it, Thaddeus acknowledged. How did you know that? Kieran shrugged. I heard her talking to one of the other ladies at the reception, about how hard they'd been trying. She seemed really sad about it. Nora and Thaddeus exchanged a look of shared amazement at their son's perceptiveness. You're very observant, Thaddeus said. Mom says I notice things other people miss, Kieran replied, a hint of pride in his voice. She's right. Thaddeus hesitated, then asked the question that was clearly most important to him. Kieran, how do you feel about all this? About finding out I'm your father? About possibly getting to know each other? Kieran considered the question with a seriousness that belied his 8 years. I always wondered about you, he said finally. What you were like. If I was like you. Mom told me some things, but it wasn't the same as knowing for real. He adjusted his glasses, gathering his thoughts. I think I'd like to know you, if you want to know me too. The simple declaration, delivered with a child's straightforward honesty, visibly moved Thaddeus. I want that very much, he said, his voice thick with emotion. More than anything. Kieran nodded, satisfied with this answer. Good. Then we can start with you explaining quantum encryption to me. Mom tried once, but she got all the physics wrong. The tension in the room broke as both adults laughed, Thaddeus's eyes meeting Nora's over their son's head in a moment of shared wonder at the remarkable child they had created. I'd be happy to explain quantum encryption, Thaddeus said, smiling. Though I should warn you, it's pretty complex stuff. I can handle it, Kieran assured him confidently. I've been reading about quantum mechanics since I was 6. As Kieran began peppering Thaddeus with questions about his work, Nora watched them together, her heart a tangle of emotions too complex to name. Relief that their first meeting had gone so well. Pride in her son's maturity and resilience. And something else, something unexpected, a flicker of warmth at seeing Thaddeus in this new light, as a father genuinely entranced by his child. Her phone buzzed with an incoming text, breaking her reverie. It was from Imogen. Decision made. Need to see you both. My sweet, 11 a.m. Nora showed the message to Thaddeus, whose expression grew serious once more. Whatever Imogen had decided would shape all their futures, not just the wedding, but the complex family dynamics that would follow. We should go, he said quietly. Will Mrs. Powell be available to stay with Kieran? I don't need a babysitter, Kieran protested, having seen the message exchange. I'm old enough to stay by myself for a little while. It's not about age, sweetheart, Nora explained gently. It's about giving the grown-ups some space to figure things out. This is a complicated situation for everyone. Because of the wedding? Yes, and because of other things too. Nora hesitated, then decided Kieran deserved more transparency. There's something else we haven't told you. Something medical. Kieran's eyes widened slightly behind his glasses. Is something wrong with me? No, nothing's wrong, Nora assured him quickly. But you remember how sometimes you get those sharp pains in your joints? And how you bruise more easily than other kids? Kieran nodded. Dr. Powell said it might be a connective tissue thing. Right? It's called Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. It's genetic, which means it's passed down from parents to children. Nora glanced at Thaddeus, who was listening with growing concern. I don't have it, which means it likely came from your father's side of the family. Do I have it? Thaddeus asked, his brow furrowed. I don't know, Nora admitted. But if Kieran does have EDS, knowing your medical history could be very important for his treatment. That's one of the things we need to discuss with Imogen, how to handle Kieran's medical needs going forward. What kind of treatment would I need? Kieran asked, a hint of anxiety entering his voice for the first time. Nothing dramatic, Nora assured him. Mostly monitoring, maybe physical therapy, being careful with certain activities. But having your father's medical information will help the doctors know exactly what we're dealing with. Thaddeus moved closer to Kieran, his expression serious but gentle. If there's anything I can do to help, tests, medical history, whatever's needed, I'll do it immediately. Your health is the most important thing. The simple declaration seemed to reassure Kieran. Okay, but I still don't need a babysitter while you talk to Ms. Frost. Nora and Thaddeus exchanged a look, silently negotiating. Finally, Thaddeus spoke. How about a compromise? Instead of a babysitter, would you be interested in joining the children's nature hike that's scheduled for this morning? I understand they're going to be looking for fossils along the lakeshore. Kieran's face lit up. Real fossils. Real fossils, Thaddeus confirmed. The guide is a paleontologist from the State University. That sounds acceptable, Kieran said with such adult seriousness that both parents had to suppress smiles. After arranging for Kieran to join the nature hike, Nora and Thaddeus made their way to Imogen's suite, the weight of the impending conversation heavy between them. Neither spoke much during the short walk, each lost in their own thoughts about what Imogen might have decided and what it would mean for all of them. When they arrived at her suite, they found Imogen transformed from the emotional woman of the previous night. She was perfectly put together in a crisp white blouse and tailored pants, her hair swept into an elegant updo, her makeup flawless. Only the slight shadows beneath her eyes betrayed any sign of a difficult night. Thank you for coming, she said, ushering them into the sitting area where a tray of coffee and pastries waited. Please sit. They arranged themselves awkwardly, Imogen taking a chair while Nora and Thaddeus sat on opposite ends of the sofa. For a moment, no one spoke, the tension in the room palpable. I've made my decision, Imogen said finally, her voice steady. I'm going to postpone the wedding. Thaddeus nodded slowly, accepting her choice without protest. I understand. Not cancel, Imogen clarified, looking between them. Postpone. There's a difference. What are you thinking? Nora asked gently. I'm thinking that none of us should make permanent, life-altering decisions in the midst of such an emotional situation, Imogen replied, her tone measured and thoughtful. Thad and I need time. Time for him to get to know his son. Time for me to process what this means for our relationship. Time for all of us to figure out how we move forward. She turned her gaze directly to Thaddeus. I love you, she said simply. That hasn't changed overnight. But the circumstances of our life together have changed dramatically, and I need to be certain I can accept those new terms before I commit to forever. That's more than fair, Thaddeus acknowledged. I want you to be sure, Imogen. About all of it. What about the guests? Nora asked, practical concerns rising to the fore. The arrangements? They've already been informed, Imogen said. I spoke with the wedding planner at dawn. We're converting today's ceremony into a celebration of friendship instead, still formal, still with the dinner and dancing afterward, but without the legal binding. Most guests are being understanding, especially since we're still providing the full weekend of activities they were promised. The decisiveness of her planning impressed Nora. This was the Imogen she remembered from college, pragmatic and efficient when faced with a crisis, able to reorganize and adapt without falling apart. There is one other matter we need to discuss, Imogen continued, her gaze shifting to include Nora. Kieran's medical situation. How did you know about that? Nora asked, surprised. Thad told me last night, Imogen explained. And it's actually one of the reasons I wanted to speak with both of you together. She took a deep breath. I have a proposition. Nora and Thaddeus exchanged confused glances. What kind of proposition? Thaddeus asked. I'm on the board of the Metropolitan Fertility Foundation, Imogen said. The same organization that brought Thad and me together. We don't just support fertility treatments. We also fund genetic research, especially for hereditary conditions that affect children. She leaned forward, her expression earnest. There's a new research program focused specifically on Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. They're developing advanced genetic testing that can identify specific mutations and tailor treatments accordingly. Kieran would be an ideal candidate for the program. What would that involve? Nora asked cautiously. Comprehensive genetic testing for Kieran, Thad, and ideally both extended families to trace the inheritance pattern. The foundation would cover all costs, of course. In return, the anonymized data would contribute to their research. And the benefit for Kieran? Thaddeus asked, his protective instincts clearly engaged. The most advanced diagnosis and treatment protocol available, Imogen replied. Access to specialists who are leading the field. And potentially, if he qualifies, participation in clinical trials for new supportive therapies. Nora considered the offer carefully. This is very generous, Imogen. But I have to ask why? After everything that's happened, Imogen's expression softened. Because despite the complicated circumstances, Kieran is a child who needs help. And because, she hesitated, vulnerability briefly showing through her composed exterior. Because even if Thad and I don't end up together, I've spent years working with the foundation. Helping families and children is important to me. It's who I am. The simple statement resonated with both Nora and Thaddeus. Whatever else had changed in their complicated triangle, Imogen's fundamental character, her compassion and determination to make a difference, remained constant. I think it's worth considering, Thaddeus said, looking to Nora for her opinion. But of course, it would be entirely Kieran's choice whether to participate. I agree, Nora nodded. I'll discuss it with him. And, thank you, Imogen. This is incredibly kind, given the circumstances. The circumstances are what they are, Imogen replied with a small shrug. We can't change the past. We can only decide how to move forward from here. As they continued discussing the logistics of both the postponed wedding and the potential medical program for Kieran, Nora found herself watching Imogen with newfound respect. The girl she had known in college had grown into a woman of remarkable strength and dignity, someone who could face heartbreak and disappointment without losing her sense of purpose or compassion. Whatever happened between Imogen and Thaddeus going forward, Nora hoped they might somehow salvage their friendship. There had been a time when Imogen had been like a sister to her. Perhaps, in this strange new family configuration they were creating, they could find their way back to some version of that bond. After finalizing the details with Imogen, Nora and Thaddeus left the suite to retrieve Kieran from his nature hike. As they walked along the lakeside path, a comfortable silence settled between them, the first moment of genuine peace since their world had turned upside down the previous evening. She's remarkable, Thaddeus said finally. Imogen, the way she's handling all of this. She is, Nora agreed. Though I'm not entirely surprised. She was always the most resilient of our friend group in college. Nothing kept her down for long. Do you think she'll go through with the wedding eventually? Once the shock wears off? Nora considered the question carefully. I don't know. That depends on a lot of factors, including how we handle the next few months. She glanced at him. And what you want, of course. Thaddeus was quiet for a moment, his gaze fixed on the lake stretching before them. 24 hours ago, I thought I knew exactly what I wanted. Now everything's changed. Because of Kieran? Because of Kieran, he acknowledged. Because of you. Because of realizing that the past 9 years have been built on a misunderstanding that cost all of us so much. The implication hung in the air between them, unspoken but unmistakable. Before Nora could formulate a response, they spotted Kieran among a group of children returning from their hike, his face alight with excitement as he clutched a small bag of what appeared to be his fossil finds. Mom, Dad, he called out, waving enthusiastically. Look what I found. The casual use of Dad, so new and yet delivered with such natural ease, stopped both adults in their tracks. Thaddeus's expression transformed with wonder and barely contained emotion. He called me Dad, he said softly, as if afraid speaking too loudly might break the spell. He did, Nora confirmed, equally moved by the simple declaration of acceptance. Kieran reached them, proudly displaying his collection of small fossils. The guide said this one is over 300 million years old, he explained, holding up a small stone with the distinct impression of a prehistoric fern. And this one might be part of a trilobite. That's incredible, Thaddeus said, examining each specimen with genuine interest. Did you know that fossils like these helped scientists understand how quantum systems might preserve information over time? Really? Kieran's eyes widened behind his glasses. How? As father and son walked ahead, deep in conversation about the intersection of paleontology and quantum physics, Nora followed a few steps behind, watching them with a mixture of joy and wistfulness. They fit together so naturally, these two kindred spirits with their shared passion for understanding the universe's mysteries. What place would she have in this new configuration? Would she become merely the co-parent, the practical administrator of Kieran's daily life, while Thaddeus provided the intellectual stimulation and excitement? Or could they find a way to balance their roles, to complement rather than compete with each other in raising their remarkable son? The questions had no immediate answers, but watching Kieran's animated gestures as he explained something to his newfound father, Nora knew one thing with absolute certainty. Whatever complexities lay ahead, seeing her son this happy made every difficult conversation worth it. The remainder of the day passed in a whirlwind of activity. Imogen's celebration of friendship required nearly as much preparation as a wedding would have. Guests needed to be informed of the change in plans, the ceremony needed to be modified, and 1,000 small details required attention. Nora found herself unexpectedly involved in the preparations when Imogen called asking for her help with some last-minute design adjustments to the pavilion. Working together to transform the wedding setup into something more appropriate for the revised event, they fell into a rhythm reminiscent of their college days, when they'd pulled all-nighters to complete design projects. You still have an excellent eye for balance, Imogen commented as Nora rearranged a floral display. You could have been a successful event designer if you'd wanted. Interior design suits me better, Nora replied. More permanent, less stressful. And the hours are more compatible with raising a child alone. Imogen's hands stilled on the table, setting she was adjusting. You won't be raising him alone anymore, she observed quietly. No, Nora acknowledged, the reality of this fundamental change still sinking in. I suppose I won't. Are you okay with that? The question was surprisingly gentle, free of the accusation or bitterness Nora might have expected. I'm adjusting to the idea, she admitted. It's been just the two of us for so long. Thad will be a good father, Imogen said, resuming her work. It's one of the things that attracted me to him, how much he wanted a family, how seriously he took the idea of parenthood. He seems to be falling into the role naturally, Nora agreed. Kieran already adores him. And Thad clearly adores Kieran. Imogen's smile held a touch of sadness. I saw them together earlier, heads bent over some science project Thad improvised from materials in his suite. The resemblance is uncanny, not just physical, but in how their minds work. I noticed that too. They worked in companionable silence for a while, each lost in her own thoughts. Finally, Imogen spoke again, her voice carefully casual. "What happens after this weekend? Have you discussed it yet?" Briefly, Nora replied. "Thaddeus wants to be involved in Kieran's life, of course. We'll have to work out the logistics. We live on opposite coasts." "He mentioned possibly opening a branch office near you," Imogen said, "to make co-parenting easier." This was news to Nora. "He didn't mention that to me." "I'm not surprised. He's still processing everything himself." Imogen straightened a row of votive candles with meticulous precision. "For what it's worth, I think he's trying to be respectful of your role as Kieran's primary parent. He's aware that he's the newcomer in your son's life." "Our son," Nora corrected gently. "That's something I'm trying to adjust to as well, sharing Kieran's parentage." Saying our instead of my. Imogen nodded understanding. "And what about you and Thad? Beyond co-parenting, I mean." The directness of the question took Nora by surprise. "There is no me and Thad," she said quickly. "That was 9 years ago. We're different people now." "Are you?" Imogen's gaze was penetrating. "Because I've seen how you look at each other when you think no one's watching. There's history there, Nora. Unresolved history." "Imogen, I'm not accusing you of anything," Imogen clarified, her tone softening. "I'm just trying to understand the full picture before I make any permanent decisions about my own future." The honesty of the statement deserved an equally honest response. "I don't know what I feel for Thaddeus," Nora admitted. "There's a connection there, yes. A shared history, a shared child. But that doesn't mean we're meant to be together now." "And if you were?" Imogen asked. "If those feelings are still there, or could be again?" Nora met her friend's gaze directly. "Then I would be honest about it, with myself, with Thaddeus, and with you. But I wouldn't act on it while his commitment to you is still unresolved. I promise you that, Imogen." Something in Imogen's expression relaxed at this assurance. "Thank you for that. And for your honesty." She picked up another centerpiece, moving it to a different table. "You know, in some twisted way, this situation has reminded me of why we were such good friends in college. You always were unfailingly ethical, even when it would have been easier not to be." "So were you," Nora pointed out. "I still remember how you returned that expensive textbook you found in the library, even though you could barely afford your own copy." "God, I'd forgotten about that." Imogen laughed, the sound genuine for the first time since the revelations of the previous night. "The moral dilemmas of broke college students. Slightly different stakes than what we're facing now," Nora acknowledged with a rueful smile. "Slightly," Imogen agreed. Then, more seriously, "Whatever happens with Thad and me, with Thad and you, I hope we can find our way back to being friends, Nora. Real friends. I've missed that more than I realized." The simple sincerity of the statement touched Nora deeply. "I'd like that too," she said softly. "Very much." The evening's celebration of friendship was a testament to Imogen's skill at transforming potential disaster into something meaningful and beautiful. The lakeside pavilion glowed with hundreds of lanterns, the tables arranged in a circular pattern that encouraged conversation and connection rather than the traditional hierarchical layout of a wedding reception. In place of wedding vows, Imogen and Thaddeus each gave brief speeches about the importance of honesty, adaptability, and facing life's unexpected challenges with grace. Thinly veiled references to their current situation that nonetheless resonated with the assembled guests. If anyone thought the last-minute change of plans strange, they were too polite to comment directly, instead embracing the revised celebration with enthusiasm. Kieran, dressed in a child-sized suit that Thaddeus had somehow procured that afternoon, moved between his parents throughout the evening, clearly delighting in his new expanded family circle. Nora watched with a mixture of joy and wistfulness as he proudly introduced his father to other children at the event, his usual reserve transformed into excited animation. "He seems to be adjusting remarkably well," a voice observed from beside her. Nora turned to find Dr. Rowan Powell, Kieran's pediatrician and an unexpected guest at the weekend's events. "Dr. Powell," she said, surprised. "I didn't realize you were here." "Imogen invited me as a representative of the Metropolitan Fertility Foundation," he explained. "I serve on their medical advisory board. Small world, isn't it?" "Increasingly so," Nora agreed with a rueful smile. "And yes, Kieran is adapting better than I could have hoped. He's always wanted to know his father." "Children are often more resilient than we give them credit for," Dr. Powell noted, watching as Thaddeus bent to listen intently to something Kieran was explaining, especially when the adults in their lives prioritize their well-being over their own emotional complications. "We're trying," Nora said. "All of us." Imogen mentioned the possibility of enrolling Kieran in our EDS research program. Dr. Powell continued, "I think it could be tremendously beneficial for him. His symptoms have been concerning me for some time, but without a complete family medical history, diagnosis has been challenging. Thaddeus is willing to undergo whatever testing is necessary," Nora assured him. "He's completely committed to Kieran's health." "Excellent. And what about you, Nora? How are you handling all of this?" The question, asked with genuine concern rather than mere curiosity, caught Nora off guard. She had been so focused on managing Kieran's needs and navigating the complex dynamics with Thaddeus and Imogen that she had barely considered her own emotional state. "I'm adapting," she said finally. "It's an adjustment, sharing Kieran after so many years of being his only parent. But seeing how happy he is with Thaddeus makes it easier. And your history with Mr. Lockhart? That doesn't complicate matters." Nora gave him a sharp look. "Did Imogen discuss that with you?" "No," Dr. Powell assured her. "But I've been Kieran's doctor since he was born. I've seen the resemblance. And I've heard you mention his father's name once or twice over the years." He smiled gently. "Doctor-patient confidentiality works both ways, Nora. Your secrets have always been safe with me." "Thank you for that," she said, touched by his discretion. "And yes, our history does complicate things. But we're both committed to putting Kieran first." "A noble intention," Dr. Powell acknowledged. "Just remember that children are perceptive. They sense tension, unresolved feelings. Sometimes the best gift parents can give their children is honest closure to their own relationship, whatever form that closure takes." Before Nora could respond to this surprisingly insightful advice, Kieran appeared at her side, his eyes bright with excitement behind his glasses. "Mom, Dad says he's taking me to the Kennedy Space Center next month. They have real space suits and moon rocks and everything." "Does he now?" Nora raised an eyebrow, looking past Kieran to where Thaddeus was approaching with an apologetic expression. "I should have discussed it with you first," Thaddeus acknowledged. "Kieran mentioned his interest in space exploration, and I got carried away with the possibilities." "I see," Nora said, amused despite herself at his evident enthusiasm. "Well, we'll have to check the school calendar before making any definite plans." "Of course," Thaddeus agreed quickly. "Whatever works best for both of you." Dr. Powell excused himself tactfully, leaving the three of them, mother, father, son, standing together in a configuration that was both brand new and somehow deeply familiar. "They're about to start the dancing," Kieran informed them importantly. "Ms. Frost said I should tell you both to come to the dance floor." "Did she now?" Nora exchanged a look with Thaddeus, wondering what Imogen was planning. They followed Kieran to the large wooden dance floor that had been constructed at the center of the pavilion. Soft lights twinkled overhead, and the live band was preparing to begin their first set. Imogen stood near the bandstand, resplendent in a silver gown that caught the light with every movement. "Ladies and gentlemen," she addressed the gathered guests, her voice clear and composed. "In place of the traditional first dance between bride and groom, I'd like to invite everyone to join us on the dance floor for a celebration of connections, old and new, expected and surprising." She gestured to where Nora, Thaddeus, and Kieran stood. "Sometimes life presents us with unexpected turns, but if we're brave enough to follow them, they can lead to something even more beautiful than what we had planned." With that surprisingly philosophical statement, she nodded to the band, who began playing a gentle waltz. Imogen descended from the bandstand and approached Thaddeus, extending her hand in invitation. He took it with a questioning look, and she leaned close to whisper something in his ear that made his expression shift from confusion to understanding. As Thaddeus and Imogen began to dance, other couples joined them on the floor. After a moment's hesitation, Nora knelt beside Kieran. "Would you like to dance with your mom?" she asked with a smile. "I don't really know how," he admitted, looking uncertain. "That's okay. You can stand on my feet, and I'll show you the steps." As Nora guided Kieran through a simplified waltz, she caught glimpses of Thaddeus and Imogen in conversation as they danced. Whatever they were discussing seemed intense, but not angry. Imogen's expression was thoughtful, Thaddeus's earnest. After one circuit of the dance floor, Imogen guided Thaddeus toward Nora and Kieran. "May we cut in?" she asked with a smile that contained both sadness and genuine warmth. "I'd love a dance with this handsome young man, and I think these two might have some things to discuss." Before Nora could process what was happening, Imogen had taken Kieran's hand and led him away, leaving her standing face to face with Thaddeus. "May I?" he asked quietly, extending his hand. Nora hesitated only briefly before placing her hand in his. As they began to move together, she was struck by how familiar it felt, his hand at her waist, their steps naturally falling into sync. They had danced like this years ago, at charity galas and friends' weddings, before everything fell apart. "What did Imogen say to you?" she asked, keeping her voice low. "That she's going to Europe for a few months," Thaddeus replied, his expression complex. "To think, to heal, to decide what she truly wants. And that while she's gone, she wants me to do the same." "And what do you want, Thaddeus?" The question emerged before Nora could stop it. His gray eyes, so like Kieran's, held her steadily. "I want to be a father to my son. I want to make up for the years I've missed. Beyond that," he hesitated. "I think we all need time, Nora. Time to process, to adjust, to figure out what this new reality means for each of us." It was a measured, thoughtful response, neither a declaration nor a dismissal. And in that moment, Nora realized it was exactly what she needed to hear. Not promises, not regrets, but an acknowledgement that they were all navigating uncharted waters, and that rushing forward without careful consideration would only lead to more pain and confusion. "I agree," she said simply. "Time is what we all need." They continued dancing in companionable silence, each lost in their own thoughts, yet connected by the gentle rhythm of the music and the shared knowledge that whatever the future held, their lives were now irrevocably intertwined through the bright-eyed boy currently being taught an elaborate twirl by Imogen across the dance floor. The next morning dawned clear and bright, the lake a perfect mirror of the blue sky above. Most of the wedding guests had departed the previous evening or early that morning, leaving the resort peaceful and relatively empty. Nora stood on the deck of their cabin, coffee in hand, watching Kieran and Thaddeus at the end of the dock. They had risen early to set up Kieran's telescope for one last observation session before the drive home. Even from a distance, their connection was evident in their matching postures, the animated gestures as they discussed whatever celestial object had captured their attention. The sound of footsteps on the deck announced Imogen's arrival. She looked fresh and composed in a simple sundress, her engagement ring notably absent from her left hand. "Morning," she said, joining Nora at the railing. "They're quite the pair, aren't they?" "They are," Nora agreed, offering her a cup of coffee from the carafe she'd prepared. "How are you doing?" "Really?" Imogen accepted the coffee with a grateful nod. "Surprisingly okay, all things considered. There's a certain relief in postponing the wedding, actually. I think part of me knew we were moving too fast, but I got caught up in the romance of it all." "What happens now?" Nora asked. "Thaddeus mentioned you're going to Europe?" "Yes, for 3 months at least. I have clients in Paris and Milan who've been asking me to consult on projects for ages. It seems like the perfect time to accept." Imogen sipped her coffee thoughtfully. "Distance will be good for all of us, I think. Give everyone space to adjust to this new reality. And when you return?" "That depends on a lot of things," Imogen said with a small shrug. "On what I discover about myself while I'm away. On what Thad discovers about himself while I'm gone. On whether there's still a foundation for us to build on." She turned to face Nora directly. "And it depends on you and Thad too. On whether there's something still there that needs to be explored." "Imogen, I'm not accusing you of anything," Imogen assured her quickly. "But I'm not blind either. There's a connection between you that goes beyond just being Kieran's parents. Maybe it's just the echo of your past relationship, or maybe it's something more. Either way, I'd rather know the truth than live with uncertainty." Her honesty deserved an equally honest response. "I don't know what's between Thaddeus and me anymore," Nora admitted. 9 years is a long time. We're different people now. But some things don't change, Imogen observed, her gaze returning to the pair on the dock. Some connections endure, even when we think they're lost forever. They stood in companionable silence for a moment, watching as Kieran pointed excitedly at something visible through the telescope, Thaddeus bending to look. "Whatever happens," Imogen said finally, I want you to know that I don't blame you for any of this, Nora. Not for the past misunderstandings, not for keeping Kieran's existence secret, not for the complicated feelings that might still exist between you and Thad. Life is messy. Hearts are messier still. The simple absolution, offered without reservation, moved Nora deeply. Thank you, she said softly. That means more than I can express. Just promise me one thing. Anything. If you and Thad do find your way back to each other, make sure it's because you truly want a future together, not just because of your shared past or because of Kieran. Imogen's expression was earnest. You both deserve genuine happiness, not just a convenient arrangement. I promise, Nora assured her. And Imogen, I hope you find happiness too, whatever form it takes. You deserve that as much as anyone. Imogen smiled, a genuine expression that reached her eyes. I think I will. For the first time in years, I feel like I'm making choices for myself, not just following expectations or settling for what seems available. As they stood together watching the father and son on the dock, Nora was struck by the strange circular nature of life, how endings could become beginnings, how loss could lead to unexpected gains, how the secrets we keep to protect ourselves might ultimately need to be revealed for true healing to occur. The weekend had begun with an invitation to witness a friend's wedding. Instead, it had become the catalyst for unraveling 9 years of misunderstandings and creating new possibilities none of them could have anticipated. Whether those possibilities would lead to renewed romance, strengthened friendship, or simply a more honest co-parenting arrangement remained to be seen. But watching Kieran's animated face as he shared his passion for the stars with the father he'd only just discovered, Nora knew one thing with absolute certainty. Whatever complications lay ahead for the adults in this unusual triangle, they had given her son an immeasurable gift. The knowledge that he was wanted, valued, and loved, not just by one parent, but by a circle of adults committed to his well-being. And in the end, wasn't that the most important outcome of all? 6 months later, Nora stood in her kitchen preparing dinner while Kieran sat at the counter working on his science fair project, a sophisticated model demonstrating the principles of quantum encryption inspired by his father's work. Do you think Dad will make it back in time to see the final presentation? Kieran asked, carefully connecting wires in the display. He promised he'd try. His text this morning said his flight should land by noon tomorrow, Nora replied, checking the casserole in the oven. Barring any delays, he'll be there with plenty of time to spare. Good, Kieran said with satisfaction. I want to show him how I implemented his suggestions about the visual demonstration. Nora smiled at her son's obvious excitement. The past 6 months had seen remarkable changes in their lives, all revolving around the new relationship between father and son. Thaddeus had indeed opened a West Coast office of his company, allowing him to spend at least 1 week each month in the same city as Kieran. Between those visits, they maintained daily video calls, collaborating on science projects, discussing books they were both reading, and building the bond that circumstances had denied them for 8 years. The doorbell rang, interrupting her thoughts. That must be your father now, she said, checking her watch with surprise. He's a day early. Yes. Kieran jumped off his stool and raced to the door, throwing it open with enthusiasm. Dad, you're early. Come see what I did with the encryption model. But it wasn't Thaddeus who stood on their doorstep. Instead, Imogen waited there, looking tanned and relaxed in casual travel clothes, a hesitant smile on her face. Imogen, Kieran exclaimed, recovering quickly from his surprise. You're back from Europe. I am, she confirmed, accepting his spontaneous hug with obvious pleasure. Just got back yesterday. I hope it's okay that I stopped by without calling first. Of course, Nora assured her, coming to the door. We're always happy to see you. Come in. We were just about to have dinner. There's plenty if you'd like to join us. That would be lovely, thank you. Imogen entered the house, looking around with appreciation. You've made some changes to the living room. The new color scheme is beautiful. Mom's been redecorating, Kieran informed her importantly. She says creative expression is an important outlet for processing emotional transitions, whatever that means. Both women laughed at his matter-of-fact repetition of Nora's therapeutic explanation. It means that sometimes changing your surroundings helps you adjust to changes in your life, Nora explained, guiding them toward the kitchen. And we've certainly had plenty of those lately. So I've heard, Imogen said, accepting the glass of wine Nora offered. Thad mentioned you've been setting up a co-parenting arrangement that seems to be working well. It is, Nora confirmed. Kieran spends 1 weekend a month in San Francisco with Thaddeus, and Thaddeus comes here for at least a week each month. Plus there are the video calls, the joint science projects, the medical appointments. Mom, can I show Ms. Frost my science fair project? Kieran interrupted, practically vibrating with eagerness to display his work. Of course, sweetheart. But let's set the table first so dinner doesn't get cold. With Kieran temporarily distracted by table-setting duties, Imogen moved closer to Nora at the kitchen counter. How are you really? She asked quietly. Thad said you've been amazing through all of this, but I wanted to hear it from you directly. I'm good, Nora said, and realized she meant it sincerely. Better than I expected, actually. Seeing Kieran and Thaddeus together, it's been healing in ways I didn't anticipate. And the two of you? You and Thad. The question was asked casually, but Nora could hear the underlying current of genuine concern. We're co-parents, she replied carefully. Friends, even. But that's all, Imogen. We've both been very careful about maintaining appropriate boundaries. Something in Imogen's expression relaxed at this assurance. That's probably wise, given how fresh everything still is. It is, Nora agreed. And speaking of Thaddeus, how are things between you two? He mentioned you'd been in touch since you returned. We had dinner last night, Imogen confirmed. It was clarifying. 3 months apart gave us both perspective we needed. Before she could elaborate, Kieran reappeared, having completed his table-setting task. Can I show Ms. Frost my project now? Go ahead, Nora laughed, recognizing that her son's patience had reached its limit. As Kieran led Imogen to the dining table where his project was set up, launching into a detailed explanation of quantum principles that would have challenged most adults to follow, Nora took a moment to observe them together. Imogen listened with genuine interest, asking thoughtful questions that delighted Kieran with their insight. She had changed during her European sojourn, not just the subtle physical changes of a tan and a new hairstyle, but something deeper, a certain groundedness and clarity that hadn't been there before. Whatever revelations or decisions she had reached during her time away, they seemed to have brought her peace. Dinner was a lively affair, with Kieran dominating the conversation with tales of his latest school adventures and scientific discoveries. Imogen shared stories of the architectural wonders she'd visited in Europe, and Nora contributed updates on her latest design projects. It felt natural, comfortable, 3 people who had found their way to friendship despite the complicated circumstances that had brought them together. After Kieran had been sent to get ready for bed, promising Imogen he would show her his telescope collection in the morning if she came back to visit, the 2 women settled in the living room with fresh glasses of wine. He's thriving, Imogen observed. Having Thad in his life has been good for him. It has, Nora agreed. And the medical treatments through the Foundations program have made a huge difference too. His joint pain is significantly reduced, and the physical therapy is helping with his flexibility issues. I'm so glad to hear that. Imogen's smile was genuine. The Foundation's work means even more to me now that I've seen its impact on someone I care about. They sat in companionable silence for a moment, each lost in her own thoughts. Finally, Imogen spoke again, her voice thoughtful. I've decided not to resume my engagement to Thad, she said simply. Though not entirely surprising, the statement still caused Nora to set down her wine glass carefully. I'm sorry, she said softly. Are you okay? I am, Imogen assured her. Better than okay, actually. It was my decision, Nora. One I came to gradually during my time in Europe. May I ask why? If that's not too personal. It's not too personal. Not between us. Imogen tucked her legs beneath her on the sofa, getting comfortable. The simple truth is that Thad and I want different things. It took me some time away to realize it, but once I did, the decision was surprisingly easy. Different things how? Nora asked, genuinely curious. Thad wants a family, not just any family, but his family. You. Kieran, the connection you 3 share. Even if he hasn't fully admitted it to himself yet. Imogen's expression was thoughtful rather than bitter. And I want something else. Something I'm still defining. But that definitely doesn't include trying to fit myself into a family unit where I'll always feel like an outsider. Imogen. It's not a criticism, Nora. Just an observation. Imogen sipped her wine. The 3 of you have something special, a bond that goes beyond just biological connection. I saw it that weekend at the lake, and I've seen it in how Thad talks about Kieran, about you, about the life you're building together. We're just co-parents, Nora protested weakly. For now, perhaps, Imogen acknowledged. But there's potential for more there, if you both choose to explore it. And you're okay with that idea? I am, Imogen said with surprising certainty. My time in Europe helped me realize that I've spent years trying to force my life to fit a very specific vision: prestigious career, successful husband, perfect family. But what if that's not actually what would make me happiest? What would make you happiest? Nora asked gently. I'm still figuring that out, Imogen admitted with a small laugh. But I know it involves being true to myself rather than chasing some idealized version of success. And it involves reconnecting with the people who knew me before I got caught up in that chase. People like you. The simple sincerity of the statement touched Nora deeply. I'd like that, she said softly. Very much. Me too. Imogen raised her glass in a small toast. To new beginnings, for all of us. The following afternoon, Nora stood in the school gymnasium alongside dozens of other parents, watching as the judges made their way through the science fair exhibits. Kieran stood proudly beside his quantum encryption display, explaining the complex principles with remarkable clarity to anyone who stopped to listen. He's going to win, a familiar voice said from beside her. Nora turned to find Thaddeus standing there, looking slightly rumpled from travel, but beaming with pride as he watched their son. That presentation is graduate-level work. He gets his brilliance from you, Nora said, smiling. And his ability to explain complex ideas clearly? That's all you. Thaddeus's gaze was warm as it rested on her. Thank you for sending me his presentation notes in advance. It gave me time to prepare some thoughtful questions for the judges to consider. You didn't, Nora gasped, half horrified, half amused. I absolutely did. Thaddeus confirmed unapologetically. Nothing unethical, just a few suggestions about the real-world applications they might not have considered. You're incorrigible. I prefer to think of it as being supportively involved in my son's education. Their easy banter was interrupted by Kieran's excited wave from across the room. He'd spotted his father and was gesturing enthusiastically for him to come see the final version of the project. With an apologetic smile to Nora, Thaddeus made his way through the crowd to join their son. Watching them together, Kieran animated and confident as he demonstrated his project, Thaddeus attentive and genuinely impressed. Nora felt a familiar warmth spreading through her chest. The past 6 months had brought so many changes, so many adjustments to her concept of family and parenthood. But seeing the joy her son found in his father's presence made every challenge worthwhile. They're quite the pair, aren't they? Nora turned to find Imogen beside her, having arrived for the science fair as promised. They are, she agreed. Sometimes it's hard to believe they've only known each other for 6 months. Some connections transcend time, Imogen observed. Speaking of which, she nodded toward where Thaddeus was now making his way back toward them, having been temporarily displaced by the judges who were evaluating Kieran's project. Ladies, he greeted them, his smile including both Nora and Imogen with equal warmth. Imogen, it's good to see you again. Twice in 2 days, we're on a roll. I promised Kieran I'd come see his project, Imogen explained. And I never break promises to brilliant young scientists who might employ me to design their futuristic compounds someday. They all laughed, the tension that might have existed between former fiancés notably absent. Whatever conversation Thaddeus and Imogen had shared the previous evening had clearly left them on good terms. I should go congratulate the young genius, Imogen said, spotting the judges moving away from Kieran's display. From the impressed looks on their faces, I'd say he's a strong contender for first place. As she walked away, Thaddeus turned to Nora with a questioning expression. She seems different, more at peace somehow. Europe agreed with her, Nora said simply. She mentioned you two had dinner last night. We did. Thaddeus's expression turned thoughtful. She told me about her decision regarding our engagement. Or rather, the end of it. Are you okay? Nora asked, studying his face for signs of distress. I am, he said, and she believed him. It was the right decision for both of us. We want different things from life, different futures. She said something similar. Thaddeus nodded, his gaze returning to where Kieran was now excitedly showing his project to Imogen. The past 6 months have clarified a lot of things for me. about what truly matters, about where I want my life to go from here. Before he could elaborate, they were interrupted by a commotion at the front of the gymnasium. The principal was calling for attention, preparing to announce the science fair winners. Kieran rushed over to join them, his face flushed with excitement. "They're announcing the winners," he exclaimed. The head judge said my quantum explanation was the clearest she'd ever heard from someone my age. "That's wonderful, sweetheart," Nora said, squeezing his shoulder. "Whatever happens, we're incredibly proud of you." "Indeed we are," Thaddeus agreed, ruffling his son's hair affectionately. As the principal began reading the list of honorable mentions, Nora felt Thaddeus's hand lightly touch the small of her back, a gesture of shared anticipation of united parenthood. The simple contact sent a ripple of awareness through her that she hadn't allowed herself to acknowledge in months. When Kieran's name was announced as the first-place winner in the upper elementary division, his whoop of joy was matched by his parents' proud applause. As he raced to the front to accept his ribbon and certificate, Nora felt Thaddeus lean close to her ear. "Have dinner with me tonight?" he asked quietly. "After Kieran goes to bed. There's something I'd like to discuss with you." The question caught her by surprise, though perhaps it shouldn't have. For 6 months, they had maintained careful boundaries, focusing exclusively on co-parenting and establishing a stable routine for Kieran. But the undercurrent of connection between them had remained, unacknowledged but unmistakable. "All right," she agreed, her heart beating a little faster. Dinner. As Kieran returned clutching his blue ribbon, beaming with pride and talking a mile a minute about the judge's comments, Nora caught Imogen's eye across the room. Her friend gave her a knowing smile and a small nod of encouragement. Whatever happened next, whether the dinner with Thaddeus led to a new chapter in their complicated history or simply a clearer understanding of their co-parenting relationship, Nora faced it with a sense of possibility rather than fear. The past 6 months had taught her that sometimes life's most painful detours could lead to unexpected destinations worth the journey. And sometimes, the secrets we keep to protect ourselves are the very ones that need to be revealed for true healing to begin. If this story of second chances touched your heart, make sure to subscribe for more powerful stories about love, forgiveness, and the unexpected ways life brings people together. Because sometimes the most beautiful beginnings arise from what we think are endings, and the family we create isn't always the one we planned, but exactly the one we need.